Yeah, you just have to be there.
You know, you had to be there.
It was just great to say, like, Ollie was there for that, you know what I mean?
You have to be there.
I wish I wasn't there. You know?
You have to be there.
Right, we're very excited about this. This week's You Had to Be There is Gary Cooke. Thanks for coming into us.
Thank you very much for having me.
The hook for this is that you've got to play in the Helix, and it's this story of Ollie Byrne's time at Shelbourne. Or it's Ollie Byrne at Shelbourne.
That's correct, yeah. It was written by Gary Brown, who himself is the chairman down there, and he also played. And Ollie was a quote-unquote larger-than-life character, I think. I mean, you probably know all about him. And Gary's written this play, One Manor, I'm in it, and I am Ollie. And so, yeah, and it's on the 17th and 18th of May in the Helix. So if you're not doing anything that weekend, please come along. It's quite a lot of depth and in the show. It's good. Can
you tell us anything about Ollie? Because people might be vaguely familiar with the story, but there are just some aspects of it that, when you say larger than life, are absolutely outrageous.
Well, I've got to be careful what I say, you know. But yeah, so as you know, Ollie Byrne was a chairman of Shells. It was in his family, and he had this huge European dream, which he did. And you know all about it. I'm sure you covered it. And they got very, very close. They got to the third qualifying round of the Champions League. They were one match away, really, from, you know, getting into the Champions League proper. Would have meant €7 million, I think, or 7 million euro, and it would have been the answer to all of the problems. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. But also, to me, it's not simply about that. It's not simply about, you know, thwarted ambition. It's just about the incredible passion of the man, and I suppose what he was driven by, his relationship with his father and his desperate need to make his own father proud of him. And then he's also a man who got in his own way, really, by, you know, you're looking at me going, there's things I could tell you. So what do you know about Ollie?
Well, I know that Ollie ended up in prison for cigarette smuggling.
Yeah.
And his trick was that he would smuggle cigarettes in a horse box.
That's
and
right.
It was very successful for a long period of time, it seems, until the weekend that Shergar got kidnapped.
That's right.
And Ollie's driving around in a horse box when the entire country is out searching for horse boxes to see if they could find this, you know, wonder horse who's worth tens of millions, potentially hundreds of millions stud. And Ollie's driving around the country with a boosted load of cigarettes, and funnily enough ends up getting caught.
Yes, and as you say, he paid the price for that. So it was the idea somehow that it was a good idea at that particular point. On that particular point, on the day Shergar was kidnapped, they should have had a contingency plan. Maybe. And he didn't.
Check the news, lads.
But you know, Gary, who wrote it, has got a good take on his kind of his attitude towards that. You know, he sees himself as being beset by bad luck and almost being a victim. You know, and that's. But look, clearly. You knew Ollie?
So he would have. We were a local radio station back at the time, and you could just ring people up. Like Brian Cody would come on after every Monday after a game, and Mickey Hart would come on after a game, and the Dubs managers would come on until we started giving out about them. But Ollie was always on the phone giving out about our coverage of stuff, and we covered that whole live commentary of all those European games. And they draw 0-0 with Deportivo in Lansdowne.
Yeah.
It's the old Lansdowne still, like it still felt like one of those stadiums that could rock and make noise. Yeah. And I think the other big thing is that, so Ollie has that criminal past, but it seems to become a reformed character somewhere along the way, to the point where all he cares about is the football club. And I've spoken to people involved with that team, and the year they win the league, there's no money. They don't get paid. So they're all free agents. Mm. But they all stick around and play the whole season without getting paid and win the league. And they all will say that they did it. Obviously, there's some element of ego, but largely it's because they loved Ollie, which is so mad. That if you think of like, sorry lads, we're totally broken, you're not getting paid, but I still want you to play your job, and you're not going to be able to go home and, you know, feed your family through this thing that is your job. And they're like, all right. And then they go and they win the league. Yeah. It's insane.
Well, there's a certain devotion. Where else have we seen a kind of blind devotion recently, eh? You know, it happens, but for very good reasons. he clearly had a huge impact upon those players. I think if you're, my understanding of it from lads, I was talking to one of the former players, like called Richie Baker, played with me. You remember Richie? And he does a very funny impression of him, by the way.
Right.
Very funny. And but he I hope he doesn't mind me saying that, but sure, I've said it now. Anyway, and he said to me, and he really looked after those players. You know, if you were Shelburne, he'd do anything for you. Like, you know, and it's a very human, it's very elemental kind of primal thing. You know, this guy's on your side so long as you're with him. If you're against him, you know. But that's the way of it, and that's the way of a lot of those sorts of characters. You're either with them or you're against them.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy the challenge of playing like a complex character like that, especially the one where like you're seeking your dad's approval, which is a very universal feeling that everyone gets?
That is, and a guy's got that well in the script, and it is a challenge. You're absolutely right, because you know you've got to make that convincing. That's, you know, it's one thing to sort of say words, but as you say, everyone can relate to it, and people have got to get that sense from it, you know, that this is partially what was driving him, his need to... He references it, you know, and he gave up law school and he really hurt his own father. You know, his dad wanted him to be a solicitor, and, you know, he casually... Well, I don't know how casual it was, but he told him one day that he was going on to manage bands and run clubs and that kind of stuff. Now, you know, anyone saying that to their parents at any stage and leaving college to do so is unlikely to go down well. But I mean, you know, his father, he says it broke his own father. Wow. It really, really hurt him badly. And I get the feeling that Ollie Byrne carried that round with him hugely. But he says in the play once that he was given 2 lifetime bans, you know, for fracas, shall we say, with officials. So that will give you an indication of how driven, emotional and impulsive he might have been, you know. Yeah. Yeah. So to get all that, to make anything convincing as an actor is not actually easy.
This is like a blindingly obvious question, right? But when you're taking on like a mammoth role like this, do you learn the lines first or do you learn the character first?
That's a very good question, isn't it? It's actually hard to learn lines
but out of context.
Out of context, exactly. It is very difficult. So I've been trying, you know, for quite a few, you know, months to get these lines into my head. But you've got to go over it and over it and over it and over it and contextualize it in your own head. Learning lines at the best of times isn't the easiest. It's always repetition. But you're absolutely right. It's got to be connected to... They're not just words that are, you know, you can remember off the ball easily. It's a catchy title. A great play on the ball, by the way, may I say. But, you know, when you've got thousands of words, it's a lot to remember. Yeah.
Ollie's dead, right? You have played many characters in public of people who are alive. Is there a significant difference?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Is it? Yeah. Brendan Behan, I obviously he's gone. But I haven't really given that much thought. Most of the people that I've, all of them. Well, they're not all alive now, but I don't really quite know how to answer that question. It hasn't made that much, but it could easily. I mean, relatives could be, you know, could kind of go, "What are you saying?"
Oh,
you know?
yeah, okay. I suppose when you're doing Dunphy, like you just did, does the fact that like he's walking around, that you're going to bump into him at some point, or any of those people, any of those football people, or any of those other politicians or whoever that you've done in the past?
There is an uneasy relationship. There's no question about that. And people don't like it. They don't. No matter what they say, they don't like it. And, you know, like in Dunphy's case, actually, what we really did was just ended up doing his PR for him. No matter what you say about the guy or what you're suggesting, And in actual fact, in Après Match, the Dunphy character was a character, a very transformative character, which he is. He kind of makes things happen, and in many respects, he was quite a high status character. And I think people can roughly cope with that. But if you're playing them as low status or something, they don't like it. Or if you put bad language in, I think I once said a naughty word, and in the voice of John Giles, and he came in. This was 1998, and he wasn't happy.
Right.
He says, "You've been a naughty boy there, Gertie," right? And he wasn't joking. So I was kind of warned, but yeah. On the one hand, as I say, it's a double-edged sword. Dunphy must know in some way that it was good for him. It kind of took the edges off some of the public persona stuff, and that duality actually helps him. But I don't think anyone ultimately loves having the Michael taken out of them in any way, in any context whatsoever. But he was a good sport. Eamon Dunphy was a good sport with it. He was. We were on the show quite a few times, and he was always okay.
Is it your feeling that people don't like being impersonated, or you know this?
I don't think anyone really likes it, particularly if other people are laughing at it. They don't like it, because it makes them feel small. And
yeah.
I remember actually a bizarre moment with Gary. Gary Brown wrote this. They used to have the Shelburne lunch, and they still do actually, I think. And we used to play it quite a bit. And he managed, I don't know how he did this, but he managed to get Alex Ferguson over. Uh-huh. So Alex Ferguson was there, and Gary says to me, "Do you want to meet Alex Ferguson?" So Gary says to Alex Ferguson, he goes, "Oh, this guy does a great impression of you." And Alex Ferguson was like, "No, he doesn't. No one does an impression of me. No one can do an impression of me." And I was like, "Oh, right, okay." And then he referenced some other guy, I don't know who he was, in England who was doing impressions of him. But like, he was like, "No, you don't. And good luck, son."
And I've no interest in seeing your bad impression. Was that the...
Yes, I've no interest in seeing. Yeah, that was the subtext. It was almost the text.
Right, it wasn't even a show me. I dare you to show me. It was like I dare you not to show me.
And yeah, so I mean, I presume what he was kind of saying was, "Well, I'm inimitable," and so on, which is fine. Listen, he's the most successful sportsman ever, so virtually. So who am I to say? But yeah, it was a very funny moment, very funny. Yeah. I think some people didn't understand what they were being done. I think they didn't really get it. I remember Richard Cooper from Après Match, and he does many great impressions, but he was doing Fintan O'Toole, right? Wow. And he did him so brilliantly, but Fintan O'Toole was on, I think they were reviewing it on an art show, Richard's own show. And he didn't understand why he was being done. And he said, that he's not really in that kind of celebrity milieu, as it were. And I was thinking, no, you are. You're out there selling yourself as the great I am, the man who knows, And the beauty, I suppose, about which I loved about Après Match is that it was very transgressive. It went everywhere. It went into all sorts of different territories, including the great social commentators, of which, Fintan O'Toole. But I just remember I saw it on television and I was quite surprised. But he clearly, I don't know. He clearly he didn't think he was. He thought he was above it as well. Really, as far as I can see.
I always thought there were certain figures who enjoyed it, but it's really interesting to hear. Like, I always thought Bill O'Hurley, he kind of appreciated Richard's effort at the very least and kind of laughed. And Andy Reid was on with you. Did he just sketch with you in the 2010 World Cup, I think? Maybe because you weren't impersonating Andy Reid himself, but he seemed to really enjoy.
Oh, he did, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He did.
I thought there were people. I certainly thought Bill O'Hurley was flattered by it. But maybe that's just the perception I had from the outside.
Bill O'Hurley, he was very supportive, actually, very supportive. But I mean, he'd be very blunt. He'd come. You'd meet him. He was almost like somebody's dad, or he was somebody's dad. But he was almost like somebody you'd know as like a friend of your dad's or something. He'd just come in and go, "All right, lads," and he'd say, "Well, I thought that sketch was great, but the other one that you were doing, that was a load of old, whatever. And he'd just tell you straight to your face.
Did you guys appreciate that, or were you like, all right, screw you, Bill?
No.
You try it.
No. Like, I don't mind if somebody turns around to me and goes, like loads of people have said stuff, unpleasant stuff to me about Après Match. Some people have said it about me to my face. I don't care. I don't care. You? No.
But you said that people don't like being impersonated. So what about if people critique your impersonation?
Oh, that. If they say, fine, it doesn't bother me. Really doesn't bother me. If people say, I don't think that's any good, fine.
Why is that? That's self-confidence? That ultimately you're good enough?
It is what it is. Once you get it out there, it is what it is. It does what it does. And if enough people think it's okay and the sketch worked, then I'm cool with it. And then if somebody turns around and goes, that was crap, fine.
Yeah.
But if everyone says that was crap, well, okay, you're right. Then
need to revisit that.
I'm really getting turned over here, aren't I? Yeah. I'm contradicting myself.
No.
What's your relationship like now with the body of work that Après Match put together? Because it's like it is a life's work, and it has been a massive cultural moment that maybe is somewhat underappreciated. It's not very much available on YouTube. Loads of it isn't on YouTube for some reason.
That is true. I suppose it hasn't really been chronicled. It's in a world of abounds and chaos, and that probably describes Après Match.
Yeah.
You did a sketch with us.
Yeah,
actually.
did you?
In Germany, yeah, and you were doing a thing for RT. It was
it's called Gatecrasher. Yeah,
Gatecrasher, and then the idea was, I think I said, I'm going to go and Gilroy and smack him with a wet fish or something like that. And then when we got to, and you were in, we filmed it, and you were in the bed, and I was supposed to kind of slap you. I couldn't do it. I couldn't actually. I thought I can't hit this guy. I don't even know him, So, and I think people were getting impatient. Maybe probably you going, would you just slap me? Anyway, so.
I don't have the sketch, but if somebody out there has it, I'd love to see it. You did hit me with a sock.
It was a sock, yeah.
In the end, yeah.
That's right. I know it obviously wasn't supposed to be in any way. It was Tarantino-esque. It was the opposite. It was Tarantino-less.
I've looked it up here and I can't find it. But it does remind me of he's through the third place playoff.
That's right, yeah.
That was a whole production. He did the whole show. I remember everyone was so excited about that. Because you actually mentioned the cultural impact. Like, you're on Reading in the Ears, the 1998 episode. There is a scene from you at that World Cup. Like, that's how big it was. Like, he got into the 25 minutes of Reading in the Ears for that year, and I presume years after.
It's funny watching. It's quite disconcerting.
I imagine
watching yourself and Reading in the Ears. We did the World Cup third and fourth place playoff right up to 2018. So it became a kind of a big thing. And I remember the first one we did in 1998, it was. I think a lot of people were quite shocked by the idea that they would literally.
Was it your idea or was it RT's idea?
I can't remember whose idea it was. Certainly wasn't my idea. I think there was. I think Barry and Richard probably wanted to do it, and I think there was a fella called Tony Whelan who was the producer, and I think he wanted to do it. So it happened, and the head of RT Sport at that time, Tim O'Connor, he was a big advocate of mayhem. Actually, and I think he was the guy who got Dunphy and ultimately Giles. So he was an extraordinary character who kind of spoke like that. You probably remember him
vaguely. He's Andrew O'Connor's dad. From people who know Andrew from.
He was a larger than life character, who a huger than life character, and I don't think he was. He was very happy for it. I mean, it happened under his watch. I doubt it would happen now.
The stories about him are like he rang up the Masters and said, "We'd like coverage," and they were like, "Yeah, okay, no problems." That kind of stuff. So you used to be able to watch the Masters on.
But his capacity, Tim O'Connor's capacity for getting, he had a lot of relationships, good relationships with people. So his capacity for getting stuff was Nowadays it's all about money, but then he had relationships. He could get all sorts, including the Masters.
It wouldn't happen now, right? Why?
Everybody's terrified of upsetting apple carts, and of. The entire system is based upon, the whole sponsorship thing. It's all so much about appearances, and stuff that's transgressive is uncomfortable to, curveballs are uncomfortable to straight line thinking, and it's just part of what the totality of the world that we live in, where that kind of risk taking is not really allowed. And RTE have this bizarre ability, a habit of these curveballs coming through. I mean, you look at things like Zig and Zag and Dustin the Turkey and all that, and once in a while, stuff comes through that is supposedly not really supposed to come through, but it does. It's one of the great things, I suppose, about this country, in a way, that does exist. But generally, everything is sponsored out of it, and everyone's a brand, and there's one thing doing impressions. You look at some of the really great impressionists, and they do all their stuff, and they're brilliant. But some of the online guys, but some of it is not. It doesn't challenge anything beyond the impression.
Yeah,
because it's not allowed to. They're not allowed to do that. I think somebody recently did a one with what's his name in the White House, and that was very funny, actually.
Was it Conor Moore doing Trump?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That bit. Sorry. Like when do you realise that it is culturally significant? When that you've got this thing going that people are actually tuning in for. So the match happens and then the analysis happens, and sometimes the analysis is good and sometimes it isn't. Depends really on who's on it. But then nobody's turning off because they want to see the end, which never happens in anything anymore, right? Everybody's like, okay, fast forward, skip the intro. When do you realise that you're part of something that has crossed over, or did you realise that you were a part of something that had crossed over into the mainstream?
Yeah, quite quickly actually, because it happened literally overnight. The first sketch was on, I think it was the 10th of June, 1998, and by the next morning, I got phone calls from the Evening Herald.
Right.
They wanted to take a photograph because of the Dunphy impression, and I suppose in those days most people watch television.
Yeah.
And nowadays they don't, and so at that time it was very focused and centralised and all of that. So big audiences. And you could become well known very quickly. Nowadays, I know you can be big online, but you've got to kind of work on that. You've got to repeated exposures and so on. And it can take a while to build up, and you can be huge without mainstream people not knowing you. But then it was all channeled through television. It's like people seeing a band on Top of the Pops, you'd never heard of them before, and all of a sudden, like they're really,
massive. Yeah,
they're massive. So yeah, I was aware of it quite quickly that it certainly had a reach. But I think that whole panel, that whole Dunphy Giles thing was the dream team. It was so much. They almost took over from. It was the kind of the end almost of the era of the importance of bishops in Ireland and all that, and they took over almost as as the the conduit. I was protecting Ireland from itself, and but they did, in this increasingly irreligious Ireland, and these guys and Dunphy's capacity to get into the head of the country was just extraordinary.
But then you guys had the capacity to get inside their heads live and in the moment immediately after they've come on. It's like an adjunct to that whole thing. And I actually don't think they would have been as revered if you guys didn't exist. And I don't like it.
No, well, I kind of alluded to that a while ago, and I agree with you. I mean, I think it gave it a longevity and that duality was important to it, and I totally agree. And it kind of took the edges off them in a way, and it de-ghettoized them in the world of football. Although, as we know, Dunphy had the capacity to go anywhere. But yeah, I do agree with you.
I don't know. I'm just trying to remember the timings of all this. Like, he was on The Last Word on Today FM, and that was him kind of breaking out of the ghetto. But you guys helped to cement that because Radio Ireland became Today FM, and no one was listening to Radio Ireland, and then Today FM had a hit on its hands with Dunphy in the evenings. But at the same time, he still hadn't kind of crossed over to the point where everybody knew him. And I suppose in the back of the Sindo, which was quite a big deal. But talking about politics, but you guys,
Sindo. That's so 90s. It's great. Anyway, sorry, go on.
I just like you talk about crossing over into things. I remember you would do John Kelly.
That's right.
Those ones, they were amazing.
John Kelly, yeah, he was on. He was started out, I think, on Radio Ireland, and then he went to RT. I did some stuff on Dunphy show on his The Last Word. I mean, Dunphy's last word was, a new departure for Irish journalism, as you probably remember, for that kind of presentation, and I noticed that, up to that point in television, a lot of it, the Dunphy kind of mythology was about, the Egypt match and,
throwing the pen,
all that stuff. But when he was on The Last Word, he had a more learned, scholarly sense of, I'm the guy who knows. And it was all more intimate. It was kind of funny. And it gave my impression somewhere to go as well. And, so, but...
Are you trapped by Après Match when this is happening from a career perspective? Are you delighted that you've had that success, but somewhat concerned that it's stopping you do the other things that you want to do? Or are you just like, this is great and I'm riding the train? Is that a duality within you?
Yes, I suppose it is. I mean, it definitely... there are some people, a lot of people who really enjoyed Après Match. Some people didn't get it. But I think in terms of the world of the arts generally in this country, there is a kind of there's a definite hierarchy of what they consider to be highbrow and lowbrow and worthy.
But that's fucking madness, right? Because Samuel Beckett wrote comedy and is a Nobel Prize winner, and they're like, oh, but his comedy is and it's never, and like a lot of Joyce is quite funny, and Brendan Behan's funny, and Flann O'Brien is funny, but they're acceptable funny. You guys were popular funny. Maybe that was the problem.
Well, I think you've hit upon a fault line of the truth there. But all this stuff is, in 50 years' time, there could be some grandson or granddaughter, who's in college writing a thesis about why Après Match was in the Beckettian sense. And everyone go, yeah, no, that's absolutely right.
But it was. I mean, here's the thing.
We'll all be dead.
It's too late. It needs to get on YouTube. But you need to put it on YouTube. Everything. Come on, RT,
by the way, the one point I wanted to make, by the way, about Fintan O'Toole, by the way, is that I'm actually a big fan of Fintan O'Toole. So I hope he's not offended.
Some of your best friends are Fintan O'Toole.
Some of my, but yes, I am. I love his work. I love his writing, and I do actually.
But can I put it to you that actually what he was saying when, you shouldn't be, oh no, it's a false modesty, right?
You might say that, but I couldn't comment.
Okay.
I don't want to have a Pete Hegseth moment here.
Is there World Après Match come back to RT for big international tournaments? This year, the 2022 World Cup?
I doubt it, no. I mean, we worked together for 20 years and everything is its time. I think if you were to come back now, you just look like Dad's Army going back, and people really would. I remember there was a guy, I was outside the hotel, what was it, the Mespel Hotel on Mespel Road or whatever it's called, and there was a guy coming down in a van, and I was vaguely aware of him. Do you know the way sometimes you can feel it's not so much the speed of their vehicle, it's the intensity of the intention of the energy field surrounding the vehicle. He gets closer and closer, and I realise this guy's going to say something. And he goes, Après Match is a joy. Fair enough. But yeah, so I don't know what that's got to do with anything that we were talking about.
He was incorrect. That's where those people appreciate
But it's just so funny that he would just say the show name at a very quick line.
But yes, he really wanted to say, and I'm delighted he did. He got it off his chest. The thing about, like, for instance, I mean, and this doesn't meant to sound like a kind of tale of woe. I was aware of this from years ago, and Dunphy actually wrote about when he wrote about official Ireland, right? And he's right. There is an official Ireland, and there are certain people who are allowed to populate official Ireland, and there are certain people, not many actually, and there are many people who are not allowed. And you are we have this really strange kind of hierarchical sense of ourselves. So in terms of the arts, like the highest level of all that are people, I know who they are, and they're brilliant people, but they're kind of elevated to a status, and it's quite clear that stuff exists. Whatever you are, you're not that high level thing that's going to Hollywood or is, I think as Brush Shields said, you really had to, go to England. If you go to England and make it, then people will take you more seriously. If you're stuck in Ireland, which I suppose I have been, there's just this. We're really tribal people, really tribal, and you're put into your box. So there's been loads of comedy films that have been made over the years since I started doing Après Match. I don't think I was ever seen for one of them, and I don't really mind. Part of me just doesn't really care, but part of me goes, what makes you so sure that I'm not an actor? I started out as an actor. I'm still an actor. I'm doing this show. I acted with some of the best actors Ireland have ever produced. So we're Donald McCann, I was his younger self in his show, and I was his son in his show, and June on the Paycock. I was in some pretty big productions. And, I'm thinking, I gave my life. I started acting in 1984, and I gave my life over to this. What makes you think you so sure that I'm not somehow worthy of your project? Right? Now, only one person can get the role, and that's the way it is. And I understand that. And there's loads of people who are really great, and who've gotten quite a lot of work, who still don't get that much, as much as you think they might get, But those sorts of things, they do rankle slightly. But on the other hand, part of me just goes, I couldn't. I couldn't care. I don't care enough to, and it's not really going to change. And as I say, I don't. It doesn't particularly bother me. I exist in my own bubble. Really, I exist in a place that is not part of the mainstream, and I'm comfortable with that.
But you have a massive legacy at the same time, though. Like Après Match means a huge amount to a lot of people in Ireland.
Do you know that?
And a couple of generations too. Like, it's massive.
Because we're different generations, really. I'm significantly older than Colin, but my generation absolutely adore you. And
my dad was obsessed with Après Match, and so was I. And I went to a show with him to see Ye in the Opera House in Cork when I was maybe 12 or 13. It means the world to people, like.
Well, I know it was in the zeitgeist, and that's great, and it's wonderful that as a kid that particularly for anybody, but that you. I enjoyed it. Made an impact on you. I think our capacity to puncture stuff and to puncture people, and I actually remember we did a skit in Vicar Street in 2000. I think it was 2012 or 10 or around then, and we were doing. I think we were taking the piss out of this, as far as I know. And I think we were guys who were talking endlessly about, see, that's, I think Federer, third set, he's not I think his backhand, he just cross court went good, and then noticed he lost the ball a little bit, lost his shots. On first there is 52%. Right, and we were doing all this stuff, and people were looking at us going, "What are they doing? We don't understand." It was tumbleweed, and a friend of mine who was at it, he says to me at the he was driving his car and he heard you guys on, and then he started laughing out loud because he
realised what it was.
He finally.
Yeah.
It's not great to have a 3-week delay.
Yeah. Is that Irish thing that holding them back in the hierarchy, is that unique to our country? Because when you were talking there, I was thinking of like Peter Sellers. Didn't he basically start off impersonating people? And Steve Coogan as well. And they became renowned actors.
They did, and a lot of impressionists are also good actors, and a lot of big actors are impressionists. You hear people and Jonathan Ross doing their De Niro impression or whatever. So it kind of goes with the territory. But in the case of Steve Coogan actually is, he's an amazing actor. He's got the capacity to do both a brilliant impression of somebody as he's done in his. I'm thinking particularly of Tony Wilson from Factory Records. He did a 24-hour Party of People.
That was great film.
And he got all the nuances of that impression and almost of that soundbite impression. And at the same time, he turned that into a real person over 2 hours, which was an unbelievable achievement for us. And he repeatedly does that. So Steve Coogan is one of the great. Steve. Some people might not just quite. He's a superstar, but they might not describe him in the same breath as an Olivier or Anthony Hopkins or any. But in my opinion, he pretty much is.
But because hearing you and how you view Ireland and your relationship with the country and its people, like Steve Coogan himself says that a lot of people in the UK view him with antipathy and he's never really crossed over, and it's actually in Ireland that he's most accepted.
Steve Coogan?
Yeah, and he said this recently, so he has that feeling himself in Britain that he's probably never been fully accepted for what he is. I think Philomena was the turning point for him. That's when he started to be taken seriously in his eyes. Yeah. And that's only a decade ago. Yeah,
well, I suppose it was a film that had a lot of cut through. And quite a lot of his biopics or whatever that he's done, maybe they have a kind of a limited appeal because of the subject matter. And Philomena was a big, and let's face it, it was a film for everybody, and it was a great movie. Anyway, he is. I'm surprised. Like is he saying that he's in the ether in Ireland in the way that he isn't in Britain?
I think he said he feels more love in Ireland for what he is and his talents.
Okay, the Alan Partridge aha moment. I mean, that's I would have thought in Britain that is part of the infrastructure of that country now. But yeah, listen, I don't know. I don't know the guy. I don't live in his head. I don't know what he thinks. He's all I know is he's just the greatest as far as I'm concerned.
We asked you for a list, and we got a couple of different lists.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what was quite. And it's my fault. I didn't read it properly, so I gave you a list, but I didn't realise you actually had to be there. So it's fine. I've given you the I've been there list.
Okay, great. It's a mix of cricket and football and a bit of golf and a lot of tennis. You love tennis.
Yeah, I played a lot. Yeah, I did play tennis. Not so much now. I've got so many injuries that I can barely move. But I did play a lot of tennis, and you were in my head in certain big games. I remember, really when I was when we were playing a match in a tournament, like in a semi-final or something, and I had some of the off the ball analysis in my own head. I was going, yeah, you see, this is my guy. He doesn't really, he's got a problem, second serve at the stage of the game. He's fitness issues. And, yeah, you made me lose.
We were your internal monologue, and we were shit, it turns out. the inner game of tennis is brought to you by...
I did play a lot of tennis, and but I played a lot of football as well. I played rugby in the school. I played cricket, you know. All the Church of Ireland games, really, funnily. Croquet is not so much.
You were full-back in rugby?
I was a full-back, that's correct, yeah. I remember in those days, in the 70s, went to secondary school in 77, and, you know, friends, dads who were big rugby heads, like, I look at your types, you know. They don't seem to speak like that, you know. And you'd meet them, and they go, what are you? And I go, I play full-back. And you go, you're a prop. You're a prop, and they kind of grab you, and they go, yeah, you're going to say you're a prop. And but I was good at catching, good at kicking. I was good at all this fundamental. I was a goalkeeper in soccer, so I was good at I was good at those skills. But hitting hard the tackle, you know, Jesus, Cookie, Jesus. I heard that quite a lot. In fact, I remember there was a mess. We were playing Pres Glastool in a Junior Cup B semi-final. Yeah. And they'd scored several tries before. It was like Ireland against France in the 80s, you know, at Parc des Princes. And early on, they said, and a message came out from the captain, from the coach said, if you miss another tackle, he is going to kill you. And, you know, or I am going to kill you. It was the direct. So, yeah, that was, anyway, we got thrashed.
Were the rugby coaches different to the football coaches? Did they sound different?
Oh, totally, yeah. I mean, obviously, the rugby coaches, I mean, they all sounded a bit like George Hook. They were all a version of that. There was a lot of men who kind of spoke like that at that time around Dublin, you know. Jesus, Cookie, you know, whatever it was, particularly for rugby and for cricket as well. You got to get out to pitch the ball, guy, like, you know, and all that stuff. And the soccer guys are more, Gaddy, watch the bells, Gaddy, watch the bells there, Gaddy. Oh, for fuck's sake, Gaddy. Jesus, Daddy! I remember somebody saying to me, I played for a team called Celtic, and we won the under 12-0 league in about November, I think we won it. But I remember I was playing a match for my school, and this guy who was coaching the old Celtic team, he says to me, he says, he'd seen as part of this game I was playing with. I think we were playing in St. Paul's in Raheny, and I had gone out to try and smother a ball that some guy was through, and the referee there was no lines. The referee just decided it was penalty kick. No, he just we'd know Ferguson wasn't there that day. Penalty kick, and he goes, you got to use your imagination. I remember he said, what are you talking about? Anyway, so I was kind of smarting at this, and then this guy from Hull Celtic comes up to me, and he goes, oh, how's it going, Gary? He says, you're very slow out at that ball, Gary. And he says, yeah, you knocked them over all right. He says, yeah, get a bit of that weight off you. I was only 12. And then he was home. He says, that lad there, that blonde hair, he's not a bad player. We should be getting these lads into and I was already really irritated. And I was going, yeah, well, he's not. He's a rugby player, and he's English, and he's going back to England. So take your whatever. And I'm going to play rugby anyway because I'm going to rugby school, and that's it. Yeah, no, I did. My football career was ended. Really, in my school we didn't play. It was, you know, soccer as it was known was not a winter sport. It was rugby because, you know, rugby obviously is the middle class game and is played by middle class schools, and so that's what I was going to do. And I really liked it. I really did love playing rugby. It was great. I didn't play after school, but yeah, I gave it up and went back to soccer. Yeah.
When did the acting start? Did you act in school?
In 1984, when I was in Trinity, I was in a pantomime. It was amazing how British orientated it was. Trinity was in those days. So, the guys who wrote it were English, so all the characters were, you know, it was all. I was a rat Scargill, as in Arthur Scargill, and Michael Heseltine was there. It was really a weird British time warp. Colonialism pantomime is what it was. It was a colonialist pantomime. And it's a disgrace. That's the first thing I was in. And then right through Trinity, I did acting, and then I went to the Gaiety School of Acting.
Right.
And went from there. Yeah. So I also actually briefly in the mid '90s, I did actually work on RT, doing sports bulletins on 2FM.
Oh, right.
I did, yeah. But they were horrified that I didn't really know much about GAA. Like they were kind of going, who is this guy, and how did he get through? I think I didn't know who Babs Keating was at one point. And the head of the department in the radio was a guy called Ian Core, and he sounded exactly like, or very similar to Tim O'Connor, who was head of the TV department. They both kind of sounded a bit like that. It was amazing. I thought so that's what I should have spoke like. But so I had to brush up on my. I'll tell you who helped me. A lovely man, Brian Carthy.
Oh yeah.
And he really helped me, and he was really good to me, and he was the ultimate GAA head.
Yeah.
But then of course he was into country music as well.
Right.
He was a guy. Now he was transgressive kind of, but he was very good. I remember him trying to give me lessons about how to present and how to, because I had two ways of describing things. So I was on Saturday and Sundays. So Saturday with 2FM would be, well, it's a big day in football, and the Sunday was, well, it's a big day in GA, and that was great. And he said to me, Gary, listen, well is a very overused word, Gary. And it went from there, and he was saying, there's all sorts of ways into it, Gary. And he started doing a mock thing, and he's going, well, now down there at Parky Tolshin. And I was, I never obviously got to that point, but I could have been that guy who was going, well, I can tell you, Des down here in wherever, but I wasn't that guy. So they got rid of me, really, ultimately.
Yeah, how long were you
He fired me. He said to me, the guy, he says, listen, he says, you go on annual leave. And there was, who got my job? There was a woman called Helen Carroll, I think, and another one who became a big producer in RT. I can't remember. My apologies. But so I was. But yeah, I mean, I that they could never trust me, and rightly so, with knowing about GAA.
I guess you came back into a different building, but they recognised you on the 10th of June 1998.
They certainly did, and they were very happy to reclaim me at that point. Some of those guys in that who I think it was my first introduction to politics, and what politics actually means in an organisation, and realising some of these people really, really are very uncomfortable around me, because I could derail their entire career. Because a guy's talking to a guy who doesn't know where Park Tulshin is, where, who Babs Keating is. Like, seriously. And he's in the sports department? Man! So it was almost Après Match before it happened, really.
How did you meet the lads?
I knew Richard, he was an actor, so I knew him a little bit, and I knew Barry, because I kind of did a little forays into stand-up, and it was never really my bag either, but I knew Barry. He lived near me in Brent Bagot Street,
right?
And so down near Juries. So yeah, so I knew them, and then in 1997, they were already doing stuff in Euro '96, and it never even dawned on me that I might be of use to them, and so then they did something in 1997 for the FA Cup final, and I think they did Dunphy, and I think he was dressed up in a monkey suit or a gorilla suit or something like this, and it was kind of quite funny, and Barry had Frank with the box on his head and all that, and Classic. It really was funny. And then I did a demo tape for a voiceover and agency, and Barry heard it, and I did Dunphy on it, and Giles and all. So he said, yeah, let's get him. So I got a call in about June of 1997 to say that they were doing it the next year. And I had a serious prolapse disc problem. I was lying on the floor. I had to crawl to the phone. And Rich said, listen, would you be interested? I said, yeah, absolutely. So then the following sort of May, we got going with it, yeah.
Right, okay. So that tape, however it got there, that was a seminal moment. Let's go back to the list, sorry. West Indies versus Ireland, 1976 in Rathmines in cricket. Is this that great West Indies team that... It was a birth of them, really. I think they'd had a big series win in 75 in Australia, and then they came to England, and they came then to Ireland to play a match in Leinster and Rathmines. So it was just incredibly exciting to see. It was almost like an Irish, and it was an Irish sporting occasion because it was an Irish international team. But then to see these guys off the TV, and all these superstars, and it was a kind of, I can't remember, it was a 50-60 over game, but it was a 2 innings. Actually, it was a 2 innings match, I think. And Viv Richards got a pair. He got a duck in both innings, and I was too young to understand that possibly, maybe he just didn't quite want to be here. And but the Irish team were very good. A lot of very good players, and but wow, some of the hitting was absolutely. It was kind of like. It was what it's like now, really. And I'm a ball gone over the wall into Rathmines umpteen times. And a guy called Collis King got about 30 off 3 balls as far as I was nearly hit myself by a shot. It was great. It was fantastic. The following year, by the way, the Australia came over. And a guy who's a journalist, I won't mention his name, but he was a very good cricketer. And Jeff Thompson, you've heard of Jeff Thompson, Australian fast bowler, bit of an icon, and he was in the nets, and he was allowing local kids to bowl at him. And somebody suggested to my mate, bowl him a bouncer. So my mate bowled him a bouncer. He went on to play cricket for Ireland, my mate. And Jeff Thompson looks at me, you piece of dirt. So, but you could get close to these people in those days, Yeah. It was great. You've got India versus Ireland in Malahide in 2022, so nearly 50 years apart.
Incredible. Yeah, absolutely incredible. And what was particularly fascinating about it was that 90% of them, or 95% of the crowd were Indians.
Yeah.
It was, you're in Ireland and yet you feel like you're in Kolkata. Really, it's just absolutely incredible. And their passion, and these guys are are like a cross between sports stars and pop stars and rock stars and gods. These are, the devotion to these and the noise. It was amazing. The Ireland got within 6 runs or 5 runs of victory. So it was great. It was one of the best sporting days of all time. Yeah.
From a football perspective, you did a long list, and you picked Ireland France in Lansdowne in 77 and United Liverpool at Old Trafford in 1980. So
the Ireland France 1977, that's the Liam Brady famous goal, is it?
It was, yeah. Johnny Giles also hit brilliant long shot with his left foot.
Yeah.
Which hit the bar.
I saw the highlights of that recently. But anyway, I looked that up, and it's the 30th of March 1977, and I looked up the day of the week. That game was played on a Wednesday afternoon because there was no floodlights in Lansdowne Road. Because I remember my dad talked to me, he couldn't get out of work for it.
That's, yeah.
Yeah, and it was devastating because it was Ireland against France, and obviously because of the result.
Yeah, it was. I remember at that stage there was a sense that there was quite a lot of people giving out about that Giles has passed it, and there was a slow build up and all that. But Giles hit an unbelievable shot with his left foot. I mean, if you look at it online, it's incredible. The actual shot, and then there's all these older men going, "That's the real John Giles. That's the real John Giles." Anyway, I was there with my entire family, and it was very exciting. And watching the watching the French guys, Platini and Rochiteau and all those guys, and their gear was really sexy.
Yeah,
and even
still is.
The kind of way they moved, and even their thighs were really strong and big, and they just looked like absolute superstars. And Platini was trying to move the ball with the outside of his kind of right foot in this way. I'd never seen anyone really kick the ball like that. You remember? Anyway, Brady got a great goal and we won, and I think we narrowly missed out on qualification.
I can't remember how we got cheated out of qualifying for the '78 World Cup, but which specific instance of, or did we sell our right to go? You're a Man United fan?
Yeah.
When did you become? Always was it handed down?
I was, my dad was a Man United fan, so I kind of flirted around with a few other teams. I did when I was a kid, but when I was about 9 or something, I became a Man United fan. So, and I remember the first. I mean, it was around the time they were relegated. Actually,
right.
I remember it was Dennis Law in his backfield, and I remember we were in St. Anne's Park, and I remember the guy and the commentator, because the guy didn't really understand the significance of this, but I remember the commentator going, he was almost in tears, and he was going, "Oh, the irony, the irony," like this, and. It was the first time. So years later, I heard this word irony, and so I always associate irony with this. But it wasn't ironic, obviously, for the man or the team. But then they had a great year in the old second division, where they'll be in about 18 months' time, and then Southampton 76. They lost that match in the FA Cup final, which is even now watching it. You know, when you're sometimes alone at night time and you're drinking, staring at the wall and going, "What happened to my life?" And you're playing old songs and going, "Oh, it was a great song." And then you know, in YouTube in your feed, sometimes like a sneaky one comes in, like you don't expect, like Lamal, like Never Ending Story or something. You're going, "That's not a bad song, actually." And you're drinking the wine. You go, "Ah." And anyway, and that's the time to watch Man United against Southampton. And you're going, "I can't believe we didn't win this match." And I'm staring at it almost thinking there's going to be a different outcome. Anyway, Man United, Liverpool, 1980, Old Trafford. The atmosphere in those games at that stage was absolutely electric.
Yeah.
Electric. And my dad was friendly with a guy called Alan Glynn, who was a Liverpool commercial manager, I think, in Juries. And Juries used to handle Liverpool's catering away from home.
Oh, right.
So I used to be on the bench and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So he organised the tickets. So we were actually in a Liverpool section. And I just remember a real honesty of amongst the fans, the way they talked about football, the way they talked about, you know, all right, Sammy, you just lay it off there, just give it a go, Sammy, all right, mate, don't go, hold. All these lads who were watching the game, and they really knew football, and there was a little bit of interaction between the United fans and where we were. Now, obviously, they weren't going to get into a fight with each other because it was seating and all that. But I just remember the kind of biting, but the formality of it. I remember one of the Liverpool fans giving all about whoever that was, Girls and McQueen, or whatever he said. And I remember one of the United fans turning around and going, "All right, mate, you've got your fair share." It's the way he said it. It was like this was a formal debate that they're like nowadays.
Through the chair, sir.
Yeah, but down in the terraces, obviously, it was just electric. And there was an area called the Paddock we were beside in Old Trafford, which was unbelievably noisy. Yeah. It was just intense. I mean, absolutely intense. And United won 2-1. It's on YouTube.
Yeah,
I met Kane Dalglish years later, and I just asked him, stupidly asked him about that game, and he's looking at me going, "What are you talking about? What game?" And I go, "Oh yeah, Martin Buchan had you," and he was, and that, you know, he was wheeling you around in the box. Sure, you go, he's good at that, Martin, and that's it. That's all you get, and you kind of go, "All right, thanks, great." This is my Ferguson moment. He was very nice, a very funny man, actually.
Yeah, I heard that.
Have you met him?
No, I heard that. He was really, really dry and
he's incredibly funny, effortlessly funny.
When you watch those games at Old Trafford in the 70s and early 80s, there's like so visceral. Like it's like there's almost like a spillover of fans onto the pitch.
There
like,
is.
There's like. It's like not violent, like, but there's an edge to it.
There's an edge to it,
now.
and there's a kind of
much different now.
There is, and there's a certain kind of violence in the air, even if it didn't always manifest itself. I use that word carefully because I'm not condoning it in any. I'm not. I mean, the intensity was kind of almost violent. If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As opposed to there was no fighting or anything like that, but it was kind of just on the right side of scary.
Yeah,
you know, and but amazing, just incredible. United won 2-1, and look at it, and it's on YouTube. The pitch was knackered as well. By that.
They always,
loads of sand. The pitch.
the ability to play football on those pitches, everyone's like, oh, those footballers, they'd be no good today. I'm like, actually, you know what? If they had proper balls and those pitches that they have today. Wimbledon in 2016 is also on your list. Was this a pilgrimage for you to go to Wimbledon as a tennis fan?
It was, yeah. So I grew up watching it, and so I finally got there in 2016. Yeah. So it's. Have you been?
No.
It is, as you would imagine. It's the first week. It's certainly packed. The outer courts. A lot of people say the outside courts are where to watch, and it is great to watch it there. But it is pretty packed. So you kind of need to just strolling in and kind of going, oh, I'll go and watch that game. It is not quite, but everything about it is fantastic, and as you would imagine, and getting drinks and food and all that's easy enough. Actually, on the day that we were there, I thought we were there for 2 days, and it was, I think both of them were incredibly hot, but one of them was the hottest day on record at that point. And, underneath the stand where there's kind of walkways, to get into your seats and everything, there's all these, little seating areas. And there were people sitting there literally like they'd been coming out of a war. Like they were shell-shocked by the heat. Absolutely. My mate, he's a writer, Irish writer, who's really not given to hyperbole at all. And he told me he was virtually hallucinating with the heat. It was, I don't know how the players... Fergus Murphy, actually, the umpire, Fergus, he was there, so we met him afterwards. And it was great when they emptied, that Wimbledon emptied, that I was able to... Because they were trying to get people out, but I was kind of going, no, I know the umpire. So just shouting down, it just got to feel like you own the place. But he was great. Fergus, lovely guy, and he I tell you, Fergus had no nonsense for what you need to prepare for Wimbledon. You need to bring the right gear. You need to bring your water. You need to bring your sunscreen, your hat, your whatever. Don't talk to me. I'm telling you what you need.
Right.
So, and all that. But it was great. It was a great day. And I know the many years of watching Wimbledon finals. It just it's amazing watching matches. By the way, just I was watching Connors Borg from '77, and just obviously they were the great players, and they were the great best players at the time, and they hit the ball harder than anybody else at the time, and all the rest of it. But it still looks like a completely different game.
It's totally transformed. The wooden rackets, the bounce, the sound of the ball, the bounce of the ball, the courts look so much worn. It's a totally different sport now to then.
Totally.
The year you went was Andy Murray's second win.
Was it? I don't know. We saw. I think I saw a misfiring. Nadal. He won his match, but he was hitting the ball off the rim of the racket quite a bit, and he wasn't. I don't think he was really on it. And so a great game between, I think, Jeremy Shardy, and Ray Onick. And
He got to the final that year.
Did he?
He lost to Murray.
Yeah, he's just you're really putting it up to me now. So I'm just
remember that,
I'm just a prawn sandwich fan, really. And anyway, it was a great day. Yeah.
The final entry on your list is the Irish Open Golf from 1978. Was this in Dublin?
It was in Portmarnock. We lived in Howth, so we used to cycle over. Yeah, it was one of my first experiences of just big sort of tournaments, and like the idea that an international tournament could be close to where you live just seemed preposterous, and that on the road down to Portmarnock Golf Club, people like whoever, these superstars of golf. I remember I just couldn't, I think we saw Ballesteros driving by in a courtesy car, and I was on my racing bike, and just thinking, how can we even be on the same planet? But simpler time, and there was these there was a PR. The PR people were mainly women who were in these Carol's red outfits, and they were very charming and very nice, and literally handing out cigarettes to people. It was great. And it was, who won? Ken Brown, I guess he won. Johnny O'Leary, the Irish guy, he came second, joined second with Serena Ballesteros. And I remember Ken Brown hit the ball out of bounds in the 18th, actually. So he must have been under intense pressure and then chipped in this amazing chip. My grandfather was Scottish, and he told me, he's one of the finest shot players of all time, Gary. Oh, sorry, okay. And then you literally be under the stand, sneaking through, and it's stuff that nowadays you just, and kind of patrician men kind of going, the young boys must sit here, and all this. It's very funny. Anyway, it was great.
That hasn't changed in Portmarnock. The patrician men. And it's changed a bit, sorry, before we get all the angry in Portmarnock emailing us about, no, we've let women in. We're letting them play. Gary, that was great. Thanks so much. Ollie, One Love, One Life is on in the 17th and 18th of May in the Helix. And tickets are on sale now. Search Ollie, One Love, One Life. That was brilliant. Thanks a million.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Absolutely.
Off the ball breakfast.
With UPMC Orthopaedic Care. When things don't move, rotate or bend like they used to, choose us to help you get back in action.